North Fargo is one of the areas where Fargo first started its big development. This metro has around 250,000 people total, and North Fargo is one of the oldest. Houses there can be built in the early 1900s and have a lot of historic charm and character. And in this video, I'm going over some of the pros and cons of living up in North Fargo. Now, obviously, maybe you've seen my other video about West Fargo pros and cons. I'm starting a new series where I just do a couple pros and cons videos of different areas of Fargo. This is North Fargo, of course. I already did West Fargo. I'm going to be doing South Fargo, Downtown, Moorhead, Dilworth, and I'm going to be doing them all. So make sure you stay tuned for that. If you haven't been to this channel before, I'm Sykora. I'm a realtor here in the Fargo-Moorhead area. Give people information on the area, and if you're curious about moving or houses available or that sort of thing, you can reach out to me through all my contact information in the description below. But we'll hop right into this one with some of the pros and cons of living in North Fargo. First up, one thing you should know, I kind of said a little bit in the intro, but North Fargo is where the oldest houses are here in the Fargo-Moorhead area. That's where most of the things were in Fargo originally when it was first starting to be developed and built, then obviously being built south and then west to West Fargo, and then Moorhead, of course, too. So North Fargo, generally the houses are going to be older. Again, that can be a pro or con depending on how you look at it. The houses are more historic homes. They're sometimes bigger lots. They have a lot of charm. They have a lot of character. There's a lot of mature trees in the neighborhoods. So these things, depending on what your preference is in a house, can be a good or bad thing. My personal preference, and this is just my opinion, I like the older style of houses. I also like the newer style too, but I would prefer an older style. So it just depends on what you're looking for and what your preferences are. So not necessarily a pro and con, but some things just to keep in mind. So another pro about North Fargo is that it's very, very walkable. There's a lot of great parks and places like Trollwood is a huge park way up on the northern side of Fargo by Edgewood, a golf course. And the big thing is there's a lot of trees. So that's one thing you're not going to find in other parts of Fargo like West Fargo or Super South Fargo and South Moorhead is trees. Now North Fargo has a lot of trees. You'll have trees lining the streets on both sides. You'll have trees in your backyard, trees in your front yard, that sort of thing. So that's a really big pro about North Fargo is having all those trees. And of course with those houses, like I said, they're a little bit older, which goes right into one of our first cons, which is that they are older houses. So there's going to be more maintenance and there's going to be more upkeep. There's going to be more work that needs to be done on these older houses compared to the new houses in West Fargo or South Fargo. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's kind of a trade-off. You're trading the fact that you want historic charm and character in your house for the fact that you're going to have to do more work or put some more money into it when you are buying a home. Now with that too, a lot of these houses, they're going to be a little bit more affordable than they are in West Fargo just because they aren't brand new. But again, something to consider, and it more depends on what your preference is compared to what and as an actual pro and con. Now one con about the houses up in North Fargo that I've seemed to notice is that a lot of them have very small driveways, or they have a one-stall garage that's attached to the house, or they have a detached garage way in the back in the alley. So things like this to consider if you're looking to move here to this Fargo-Moorhead area. I do consider that a con. Of course, there's some call. Of course, you'll find houses with huge garages or two-stall garages or attached garages, but generally you'll find kind of a rambler, which is with one level living and then a basement with a one-stall attached garage. So obviously that's not ideal for a lot of people when you do live in North Dakota, but it's just something to consider. And the driveways are going to be a little bit smaller, but again, very mature area, a lot of trees. The roads are going to be wider up in the North Fargo area compared to some other areas of Fargo, but just something to take into account. So another one that's kind of a mix of a pro and con is the amenities around it. So North Fargo, that's where NDSU is located. That's where the airport is located. There's a lot of things on 19th and that little mall on 19th, but a lot of stuff is down in South Fargo, so it's going to be a little bit of a drive to get way up from North Fargo, depending on what area of North Fargo you live in, all the way down to South Fargo, and all the way down to some of the things down there. But you're close to the things that are in North Fargo. So that's the same with anywhere in the Fargo-Moorhead area. Of course, you're going to be close to the things close by and far away from the things far away. But North Fargo is way up there, so it's going to be a drive up there. You do have the VA hospital again. You have the Fargo Dome. So there's a lot of events there. And the thing to consider with that too is if you live up in North Fargo by that region, by the college, NDSU, and by the Fargo Dome and by the airport, you're probably going to have some louder noise with the airplanes, of course, every single day, but also for the Fargo Dome, for the events, for Bison games, for that sort of thing. Now, again, that could be a good thing or bad thing if you like those events, and you like going to those events, and you like being close by, but also a bad thing if you're trying to sleep and there's an event going on in the Fargo Dome, or there's a lot of airplanes in the airport. But again, those are those areas that are really, really close to that Fargo Dome and to the airport. So it's a couple sections of a little neighborhood, not super huge, but something you do need to consider if you're living up in North Fargo. But again, there's a ton of houses up there, and they go all the way up to kind of Edgewood Golf Course and Trollwood Park, which is way up there, right along the kind of curves of the river. So that's a really good thing too, is you have a lot of river views or you can walk along the river, that sort of thing. So another thing to consider. And another big pro about North Fargo, obviously maybe you saw my video about West Fargo that a con was the high specials. North Fargo has very, very low specials, if any. So those areas in North Fargo have really, really low specials because everything's already built. Everything's already there. And someone else has been paying down those specials for, 80 to 100 years, depending on how old the house is. So the specials in North Fargo are very, very low, if any, on some houses. Of course, there's always houses with specials. But something to consider when you're comparing North Fargo to South Fargo or to West Fargo. And tying into that a little bit, another con is there's not really a ton of new construction options here in North Fargo. So maybe you like, the Fargo North School District, you like Longfellow, that sort of thing. There's not going to be a ton of new construction options for those neighborhoods. Of course, you'll have those little pockets of a couple of them that come up or that sort of thing. But generally, it's going to be older houses built, as early as 1900 to the late to 1950s to 60s, to that sort of thing. So they're going to be generally older. Again, going back to what I've said, I've talked about it a couple times already. That's kind of a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it, not necessarily a pro or con, but it's something to consider if you like those schools up in North Fargo and you want something new construction. It's going to be harder to come by. Another thing about North Fargo, not really tying into anything else, is that it's generally people who are a little bit older. This is going to be different than South Fargo or West Fargo, where people are kind of generally younger. Up in North Fargo, people are going to be older, just because that's where the older developments are. A lot of people live in their house a long time up in North Fargo. It's a great area, community, that sort of thing, so people will live up there for a long time. So it's generally going to be older people up in North Fargo. So if you're, a really young person, there'll be young people up there too, over by the college area and some other pockets, but generally it's going to be older people up in North Fargo. And again, not a pro or a con, just something to consider. So this was a list of a couple of pros and cons and just things to know about North Fargo. If you have any more questions or you have anything that I think I missed on this list, you can drop those in the comments below. But thanks for watching, and watch for the next video, which will be Downtown Fargo.